All right, guys, welcome to our lesson. Yesterday we were not able to have a lesson on the parting cloud. So today I may try to see whether we can do two chapters because I have a target to achieve. I don't want the month to be over before I'm done with this because there is a lot of work ahead of me. Of course, we are soon starting tuitioning, virtual plus physical. So I may not have so much time to cover for this. If I don't do it, I'll be late. So let's go on with chapter 13. I'll read it, then discuss. The chapter runs from page 73 up to page 80. So that is 7 pages. It's quite some time. All right, welcome. Let's start reading. The title is Where You From Then? Where You From Then? So it means we are focusing on our brother Shege while abroad at Leeds. Okay. All right, let's start. Shege stood in front of the immigration officer. He had waited 45 minutes in the queue that snaked the entire length and breadth of the arrivals lobby at Heathrow. The officer smacked his lips, took Shege's passport and admission letter, then said, "Thank you, sir." "Sir." Shege smiled in spite of numbing tiredness. No one had ever called him sir before. The officer leafed through the documents and asked what he was going to study. Economics, development economics. What degree, sir? PhD. Who is paying for the tuition fees, sir? My employer, the government of Kenya. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Shege smiled as he picked up the documents. The tiredness was already beginning to dissipate. The earlier sense of mild excitement began to envelop him. He was going to love this place. He followed the signs to the coach station, tagging along a large suitcase that kept hitting the walls of the unending tunnel. Half an hour later, he was on the coach to Leeds. His jaw dropped when he saw the woman driver at the wheel. Back in Kenya, buses and trucks were the domain of men. What other wonders await? He wondered. He slumped back into the seat, grinning with a sense of anticipation. It was 7:30 in the morning, and dawn was setting in. He gazed with wonder at the three-lane motorways with the blue road signs that cropped up every now and then. Everything was so well ordered that there was no risk of getting lost. You would never need to stop by the side of the road to ask for directions. The signs even told you long before the next exit. Milton Keynes, Junction 14, half a mile. He shook his head in disbelief. The roads were so smooth. Not a pothole in sight. Not a speck of dust. Memories of the road of Kaniuni flashed through his mind as if to mock him for his presumed good fortune. He could barely keep his eyes open as the jet lag gnawed at him, but the landscape was irresistible. He saw the green rolling hills and farmhouses he remembered from English books in primary school. He took in the well-trimmed fields and sheep grazing in the early light. The green in the England had a dull grayness about it. It was so unlike the bright colors in Kenya that screamed at you as though to remind you the trees, grass, and the farm crops were alive and kicking. He assumed the morning mist dulled the colors. As the day wore on and the sun came up, he realized the green was not going to get any brighter. On arriving in Leeds 4 hours later, he took a taxi to the university. Never having seen a meter, he asked how much it would be. Koplakwi, I would say. Could what? Sorry, said the Koplakwi Mate. Shege shrugged and got in the back. He gazed with admiration at the imposing red and grey buildings as they drove by the steps at the main entrance and headed on the Chester Hall. The buildings reminded him of City Hall back in Nairobi, sturdy and majestic. Chester Hall's room 6 was slightly bigger than his own room at the University of Nairobi, but just as Spartan. It had a narrow bed, a deck, and a chair, an armchair with loose springs and a built-in closet. Shaggy shuddered as the cold crept through the beddings and into his bones. He saw what looked like a car radiator set against the wall below the window. He fiddled with the round knob and waited. He had read about central heating, but had no idea what it looked like. The radiator exuded a rumbling hydraulic noise like a wild beast that had just been woken up before falling silent and rewarding him with a creeping warmth. He fell asleep and did not wake up until the following morning. The window overlooked a well trimmed lawn and flower gardens. That afternoon, after lunch of fish and chips at the cafe near the hall, he wandered around the campus, admiring the red brick buildings crammed together in what looked like a small, compact campus. The buildings were separated by lawns and well signposted roads and pathways. He made his way into the graduate common room, or GCR, a large, airy, and chilly room with easy chairs arranged around low coffee tables piled high with magazines and newspapers. A drinks machine stood in the corner with a TV at the opposite end. He approached a student whose head was buried in the newspaper. May I join you? Sure. My name is Pedro from Italy, doing mathematics PhD. Pedro wore round glasses. He had a thin mustache and wore a brown leather jacket and jeans. He looked like someone ready to go out. Shege from Kenya, nice to meet you. Ah, very nice, huh? You have many animals, huh? I see on television, He spoke with a perpetual grin, splitting words sharply into high and low tones. After a further exchange of pleasantries, Shege leafed through several newspapers, anxious for news and for news. Gabashev and Reagan were scheduled to meet again in Reykjavik. The Cold War was truly coming to an end. Thatcher was miles ahead of Kinnock in popularity, polls ahead of the forthcoming election. Scientists were still debating the environmental impact of Chernobyl disaster. More countries were shunning apartheid South Africa. There was no news on Kenya. A female student came in buttoning her black knee-long jacket as if to hide her brown corduroy trousers. Her hair stood on edge as though someone had run a hand through it and left it jittery. Hi, guys, she said, not looking at either of them. She rummaged through a pile of newspapers. Hello, Molly, said Pedro in an exaggerated sing-song voice. Molly waved a dismissive hand. Who's nicknamed the time again? Whoever it is should be banned from this common room. Molly turned to the drinks machine, muttering to herself. Shaggy and Pedro exchanged glances. Molly made a steaming instant coffee and returned to the coffee table. Fashion? She exclaimed, picking up a supplement and glaring at tall, lanky girls modeling vests and Lauren's winter collection. Think women in fur and miniskirts. You won't catch me dead in that. She tossed the supplement aside. Thank you. Maybe you should explain it. Try Italian, Shaggy ventured. Ah, you must be joking. Ah, Molly, you too heard in Italy. You forget Italy, Center for European Culture and Civilization. Ah, I beg your pardon, culture. You mean as in eating pasta? You forget, Roma. We civilized the whole of Europe when you English still living in caves. Well, Pedro, with the kind of pathetic talk, it's obvious who is still in the dark ages. Molly got up her coffee and finished and strode out of the room. Pedro stared at her, hands glued to his cheeks, as though under her spell. You're not new here then, Pedro? No. Pedro started jarred back to reality. 3 years. I feel as if I am here all my life. Huh? I just got here yesterday. You must be tired, huh? I slept all day yesterday. I hope you have lunch today, huh? Chege nodded. But I must warn you. Pedro leaned forward and dropped his voice to the conspiratorial whisper. The food here. He sucked the air through the teeth and shook his head. Is it bad? Bad? Realizing he had screamed in Shege's face, Pedro closed his eyes and slapped his mouth repeatedly. Then he rubbed Shege's shoulders. Forgive me. The food here. My food. Oh, oh, oh. At 6 o'clock, Shege wandered into the kitchen on his floor and found an Asian student cooking. Slightly built, hair slicked back, a broad sports jacket hung loosely over his wide frame. His jeans were too long. He had turned them up a good 5 inches above brown sandals. What's cooking, then? Asked Shege as he started to make coffee. Aha, nothing special, just stir fry. A small circular pot was bubbling away, the trembling cover threatening to blast off. What's that? This a this 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 rice cooker. How does it work? The Asian looked baffled. Ah, you put rice and water and I'll switch off. 50-20 minutes, rice ready. Switch off automatically. Very convenient, la. They introduced themselves. Carl from Singapore. He stirred the vegetables, threw some prawns, pieces of meat, and onions, then added generous sprinkling of oyster sauce, dark soy sauce, and a little sugar. The smells and the sizzling noises got Shaggy salivating. You're welcome to eat with me. You want? Thanks a lot. I've eaten. Already? So early, La. My body clock is still confused. You want coffee? Cole shook his head. Just drink Chinese coffee. Did you cook? I ate in the cafeteria. Aha, very convenient, La. What do you eat then? I think they called it steak and kidney. Ah, tart or pie, I don't know. Ah, I know. I tried that before, very English with chips. Of course, and mushy peas. You like it? He remembered Pedro's warning. It's all right. Shortly afterwards, a girl came in with a loaf of bread. She was wearing jeans, a white t-shirt, and a multicolored shawl over her shoulders. Chege's eyes were trained on her slim figure and blonde hair that flowed all the way to the small of her back. She wore glasses which made her look studious without diminishing the playfulness she exuded. She kept her mouth slightly open in the pose, which reminded Shege of the models or in the newspaper supplements. Hi guys! Her smile was like the light brightening up in the kitchen. Shege stared at her with undisguised admiration. He had never been that close to someone with such bright green eyes. When she blinked, she reminded him of traffic lights flashing to green. She introduced herself as Peggy. Peggy fetched some things from the fridge, butter, salad, and a sauce Shege did not recognize and proceeded to prepare sandwiches. Shege offered her coffee. You sure? She looked up as if startled. 100%. Sure, of course. Okay, thanks, said Peggy. She adjusted her hair and chuckled. 100%, she murmured. Now, that's really certainty. This is Kenyan coffee, Peggy. Yeah, that's supposed to be good. I'll have some. Yes, please. The best in the world. Oh, you're a good ambassador of your country. Laughing, Shege reached for the sugar. No sugar, please, she said, her eyes filled with alarm. Sure, you're sweet enough already, I guess. Peggy blushed, then laughed hesitantly at first. She adjusted a lock of hair. Shaggy assumed she was trying to hide behind her hand for a fleeting moment. Either of you fancy a sandwich? No thanks. He could How could anyone eat a cold sandwich for dinner? Peggy asked where they were from. She said to her, What a quite what a we have quite a number of Asian students here. They have all these parties with the most amazing food. You ought to get in touch with them. She fired the words out like a salvo of gunshots, but they were delivered with the gentleness that was both lyrical and refreshing. Shaggy wanted to hear more of her voices, but before he could ask any questions, an African student breezed into the kitchen, bubbling with energy and excitement like a gust of wind sending sheaves of paper dancing in the air. He was over 6 feet tall, a coat hanger mustache spilled onto his upper lip. He wore black jeans, an expensive look, black leather jacket, and a leather hat to match. Hey, exclaimed the newcomer. We've got a party here. I always maintain it's good to see people breaking bread together at table. The words sounded as though they emerged from a deep inside of voluminous chest and shot out of the mouth with an explosive sound. Fege could barely make out the words amidst the echo that reverberated through the deep baritone. Chief Adekule, at your service, said the big man. But you can call me Ade. He took his hat off and placed it on the table, then threw what looked like car keys into it. He proceeded to shake hands in the wide swinging gesture. Peggy said, Nice to meet you, Eddie. No, 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 my dear. Ade stepped back as though someone had thrust a blow at him. He held his hands up and in mock capitulation. This name is Ade. Ede, as in Apple, Delta, Echo. Peggy's face turned red, but she recovered her composure quickly and chuckled. Whenever she smiled and bit her lips, her teeth sticking out like a timid teenage girl. Inataka mtu aniongezee Chinese sijashiba. Yaani nayo uweke Chinese na uvume. Pita haraka kabla nianze. Unaenda na kikombe, sasa unapitia kwenye hata hakuna njia. Akili ndogo wewe. Unaona tu space hakuna huko na unajifinya huko na nafasi iko huko kubwa. Si umwage. Mwaga mpaka ifike nusu. Tosha. Nyingine ilikuwa imepoa hata haijafika mahali. Acha nikunywe kwanza kabla niendelee. Prepare. Ama wewe uende kwanza kwa mama nani umuulize atakusonga asubuhi hii ama afternoon. Ndio ujue kama unaenda church ama uendi. Anavyoenda naye alafu mrudi. Unaweka tu viatu popote. Tega could not take his eyes off her. Ade, or Ede, stood by the window, leaning slightly to one side and contemplating the mug of coffee Shege offered him. He looked as if he was preparing to launch into a lengthy lecture. Ho offered him some food, but he declined, saying he had eaten. Then he said, It's good to see you people cook. You see, Last year, when I first came, I had no idea where to buy food, so I decided to eat in that cafeteria at the Union. The girl behind the counter says, "Can I help, love?" And something like that. Oh, I say to her, "Yeah, I think I try English chicken, love." Well, I thought if there is some love to go with it, who am I to say no, eh? But I keep my mouth shut, okay? The girl serves out chicken breast and ham. You guess it, chips and mashed peas. I take my food and sit in the corner where I have a vantage point. You never know who will walk into your life. He paused to laugh. Eden spoke with great deliberation, enunciating each and every word separately. So his sentences sounded like a string of words struggling to sound connected. It was a miracle they ended up making any sense at all. But for Shege, it was a joy to hear him speak. He made each word sound like an accomplishment, as compared to Peggy, who spoke rapidly as if she could not wait to get to the end of the sentence. At this point, the other three were beside themselves with laughter, not so much because of the story itself, but the way it was being told, the strong Nigerian accent and gesticulations. So I sit there and start attacking my chicken, and I couldn't believe my eyes. The soft white meat was falling right off the bones with no help at all from my knife or fork. So soft and tender, it just peeled off as if by magic. And you did not have to chew it. You place it on your tongue and it melts just like that, like butter on hot toast. I felt cheated, my dear brothers, oh, and sister. He shook his head with a sense of resignation. It's easier to eat when soft, no? Asked Ho, visibly confused. What are you talking about? Ede glared at Ho. That's not eating, not in my book. Ho shrugged and turned to his food. Peggy froze, holding her sandwich in my mid-bite, eyes darting from Ede to Ho. She raised her hand as if to urge Ede to stop talking. Ede ignored her and just went on. Peggy glanced at Shege, who merely shrugged. They both looked with sympathy at Ko, who quickly finished his dinner and started to wash up. Soft chicken is no food for a man. Tell you this, try eating tough food and you end up a strong, tough man. Ede clenched his fist and bit into the imaginary clanch of meat. You must feel as though you are eating something of substance. Makes me wonder about the English chickens. Do some do they run around with their flesh barely hanging onto their bones, eh? You have to get used to it, said Shaggy. It's all there is, Ede. Is there all it's all there is, Ede, said Peggy. The thought of chickens running around with their flesh loose? That's like weird. So there you are, Ede, said Shaggy. When in Rome and all that you hear. No, Ede thundered. Not Ede. What you talking about? I tell you, my friends, and I found like little butchery on Hockley Road where you can buy real tough chicken. West Indies block runs the place. Genuine range, free range birds. Eh? I'll take you there sometime. Shege said he was interested. Cole shook his head and excused himself. What about you, Peggy? I'm afraid I can't. I am a vegetarian. Ede fell face Ede's face fell. He visibly shrank into his frame and fought off the mirth that threatened to explode into laughter. Shaggy went to bed earlier than that night, his body clock still readjusting. The following morning, he was washing his hands after visiting the washroom when he saw a cleaning woman glaring at him. He ignored her and went on with his morning ablutions. Hey, yo, the woman cried. Who's gonna leave himself on the floor in that era toilet? What? You heard me, she snapped. Look in this era toilet. There ain't no one else round this last couple of days that I don't know. I know them all lads from last year and the last as well. I do. You hear me? None of them would do a thing like that. Test word on the floor? Huh? Where? You from? Then, huh? Shaggy glanced around him as though looking for someone to translate. Then he remembered that one of the toilets was broken and there was water all over the floor. The you make like you don't Nasta now? Gone. Who held himself on the ear floor? Eh? They have toilets where you come from? Shaggy's stomach muscles tightened, and he was about to shout something rude at her, but merely shook his head and stared at the woman. He marched into the toilet and flushed it, then stomped away, his footsteps drowned by the sound of water running on the floor. The cleaning woman stood as still as a statue. All right, guys, so we have read that 26 minutes of reading. Now we can go into analysis. The first thing we start with is the synopsis. Of course, Chege has finally traveled to Heathrow or Leeds, and he gives us some process of traveling where while at Heathrow, the officer actually checks his documents and lets him go after asking what course he's pursuing and who is sponsoring him. He calls him sir to an amazement by Shege. Now Shege books a coach to that will lead him to Leeds, and he realizes that there's a woman who is driving the coach. He's so surprised. That is the first shock he gets to, and he really now anticipates more shocks. By 7:30 in the morning, um, that is 7:30 in the morning when he's doing this, and he sees that there are clear directions to where he should go. He sees that Milton Keynes. So of course we've said he sees a clear indication of Milton Keynes Junction 14, which is half a mile away. As finally, mhm, he reaches Chester Hall, room 6, where he's supposed to actually be staying, the accommodation area. And comparing it with the University of Nairobi, he realizes the room is slightly bigger. Now he's quite tired and it's cold, so he sleeps. And when he wakes up, he uses the radiator to actually warm himself. He then looks around the university and discovers things like the graduate common room and among many other things, the beautiful lawn, and he meets various people, especially when he goes to the TV room, the graduate common room, I think. He meets Pedro, an Italian, and gets acquainted with him. He watches the news, but not much about Kenya. At the time, of course, he realizes Cold War is coming to an end. And of course, Thatcher is leading in the polls ahead of Kinnock in the forthcoming elections. Now, he also meets other students, especially in the um, residing place. People like Molly. He meets Ede. He also meets Peggy, and is already attracted to Peggy from the first sight. Ede is quite vocal, especially complain about the kind of food the English people serve. Quite, um, you know, soft, especially chicken. And he suggests that there are better chicken in a butchery just discovered on Hockley Road. He urges the rest to join him another moment to get them, but Peggy declines, saying she's a vegetarian. Chege also has another moment with a sweeper or a toilet cleaner who accuses him of having relieved himself on the floor. Yet, in reality, there is a leaking. They are leaking taps. Now that is the synopsis. Now we can get to character and characterization. Of course, we start with Chege. Chege is adventurous. Of course, he travels and arrives in Leeds But on the way, he actually explores the lobby at Heathrow. And while in the coach, even though he's sleepy, the environment around him attracts him and he actually observes what he has been reading in books. On getting to campus, he sleeps a little while, then gets to explore the university, takes food, and later on comes back to the room. He's also sociable and friendly. Of course, we realize that in back in Chester Hall, not just Chester Hall, I think the first place he interacts with somebody is in a graduate common room. He interacts with Pedro, introduces himself, and gets acquainted with him on page 75. We also see on page 76, page 76, he finds another Asian man preparing food. And when he sees the machine he's using, he asks what it is. He realizes it's a rice cooker. That is the student known as Ho from Singapore. Later on, he interacts with Molly, Peggy, and Ede, talking with ease to most of them. We can also say he's confident because, again, when you get to a new country like this, if you lack confidence, you wouldn't easily speak to the other people. We realize that there is something here about, I think it's just out of adventurous. I've already shared about it. Yeah. Then we can talk about the next character should be Ede. Ede was outspoken. We are told in the text that unlike anybody else, he actually thundered whenever speaking, and he spoke with such a confidence that his sentences were sounding like a string of words, and people could struggle to connect. But he kept speaking. In the entire chapter, he speaks a lot about the chicken, about the butchery, and about the everything else. We can also say he's adventurous. When he discovered that the food at the campus was extremely soft and he didn't like it, he already explored Hockey Road and discovered tough chicken for himself. He is choosy. Of course, he ignores or disregards the food at Leeds University and opts to go find an option elsewhere. I think Shege is also patriotic, something I had forgotten. When you look at page, is it page 77? Peggy tells him, "Oh, you're a good ambassador of your country," because he was actually encouraging the rest of the people to take coffee, Kenyan coffee. He's also observant because I think we are getting this story from his perspective and he gets to observe every other person. Then we have, who else can we discuss here? Pedro. Pedro is friendly because he talks to Shege easily on page 77 for a very long time. Peggy. Peggy is appreciative, receives the coffee that Shege prepares and appreciates. She's also outspoken. She talks about some things before this stranger, and later on, she says she's a vegetarian on page 80. Who else do we see? Ho is welcoming. He actually, after preparing his prawns and meat and onions, he welcomes Shege to take it. We also see is outspoken. They talk a lot with with Chege. Then the other character, I think Molly never spoke. Then we can talk about the cleaner. The cleaner, I think, is quite, I don't know whether we can say rude or judgmental. She doesn't even check the toilets to see that they are leaking. And she thinks that Shege, being new, has actually lived himself on the floor. we can actually say she's also a bit arrogant, because the words she uses to lash at Shege, telling him that they don't have toilets where he comes from, you know, on all that, it's actually very um, arrogant of her. So I think those are character and characterization. We can move to thematic concerns. For themes, we have the theme of adventure. Of course, now Shege has finally arrived in Leeds, and he gives us details about the experience at the lobby at Heathrow, the coach station, and finally, so we are talking about adventure. Of course, Shege, having arrived at Leeds, experiences so much, from Heathrow to the lady driver on the wheel in the coach, to the clear labeling of how England has done, to the irresistible green rolling hills and farmhouses in England, and dull grayness around the place. Chester Hall, and then graduate common room, and then the room where he was at the kitchen, right? We also adventure education, because these students are here for studies. Pedro is here to study PhD in mathematics, and Shege is here to study economics, development economics PhD. Then we have other students such as Molly, Peggy, Ede, Ho, among others. We can say diversity. Now, this is a multicultural experience. We can see it from even the way these people speak. Um, when we look at Ede, Ede actually speaks with great deliberation, enunciating each and every word separately. That is typical of the Western African people, and he came from Nigeria. We see that for him, he prefers tough chicken, not soft chicken, like what is offered by the English people. Shege is here offering Kenyan tea. Peggy is a vegetarian. Then we see this other guy, Pedro, is from Italy. So for him, he prefers Chinese. No, Ho prefers Chinese tea because he's from Singapore. Then Pedro is from Italy, and of course, we get it even from his accent, the way he separates syllables and emphasizes them. Now, Peggy on the other side speaks as if she's racing to finish her sentences. Molly, we can see for her, she prefers tea. Is it tea? No, coffee. She prefers coffee. So we are seeing that diversity of people, given that this is an international university where students come for further studies. Um, we see change, theme of change. Shege is actually adjusting to the change of time. His body is struggling to adjust to the England clock. So we realize that he's getting back to sleep, eating earlier than the rest of them. Most of them, of course, are surprised at that. So I think majorly this part did not have so many themes, because when you talk of cuisine and whatever is out of diversity. The last bit we are going to discuss is stylistic devices. And of course, the first one that is really outstanding is dialogue. We have a dialogue on page 73 between Shege and the officer at the lobby at Heathrow. Him actually checking documents from Shege and admitting him to proceed. Shege appreciates, and of course, for the first time, he's excited to be called sir. We have another one on page 74 where Shege actually is heading to Chester Hall in Leeds University. He gets a taxi. The person talks to him in a language he does not even understand. Then there is another conversation or dialogue on page 75. Page 75, we have Pedro and Shege and Molly. So Pedro introducing himself as one from Italy studying PhD in mathematics, while Shege introduces himself as from Kenya. Then there is Molly, uh, who is actually muttering about what is happening in the room. And then she challenges Pedro about the aspect of civilization. Okay. On page 76, we have another dialogue between Shege and Ho. Ho, a student from Singapore, who is preparing rice using a rice cooker. And this amazes Shege. The next dialogue is between Peggy, Shege, and on page 77, where Peggy introduces herself. Then Shege offers her Kenyan coffee, and she says he's a great ambassador of Kenya. Then we have another dialogue involving Edekule from Nigeria, Chege, where Ede is actually introducing himself. And then later on page 80, he's actually talking about, in fact, it was page 79, where he was actually talking against the soft chicken offered in England. And all right, so we have talked about dialogue, and I think it's so much in the text. There are some parts where we can see direct address rather than dialogue, especially when Ede is talking and nobody is responding on page 79. He's explaining how when he came to this place, he went to the cafeteria, and a lady actually promised to serve very good food, but only to be cheated because when he was offered the food, chicken was too soft for what he's used to. So that is direct address. We have a lot of rhetorical questions. And maybe I can read some of them. Uh-huh. What other wonders await? That is page 73. Uh-huh. Then another rhetorical question. I beg your pardon. I think that's Pedro, page 75. Huh? Then page 75 again, Pedro says, you have many animals. Huh? I see on television. So that is rhetorical question. Then another comes on page I don't know whether the rest are rhetorical questions, but most of them are responded to. I've just given a sample of that. How could anyone eat a cold sandwich for dinner? Page 78. Huh? That's a rhetorical question. Then we have irony. It's ironical that the cleaner lady blames Shege for the wet floor, believing that he had passed water on the floor. But in reality, their toilets were leaking. It's also ironical that we could have chicken that is too soft. You don't have even to chew for you to eat, as shown by Ede and any other person within Leeds campus. It's also ironical that Shege is expecting to finish studies within the shortest time. Yet there is one person here, I think it's Pedro, who tells him he's been here for 3 years. So it means that the expectation of finishing campus PhD very fast may not be a possibility. We also see a couple of onomatopoeic words. Page 73, we have smacked. We also have page 74. I thought I saw some word here. Page 74, screamed. Screamed. Page 75. I thought there was something, page 75. Not at all. But sing-song voice, I don't know. Muttering is there. Muttering. Then 76. Page 76. Rubbed and slapped. Trembling, babbling, baffled, sizzling. Page 77. We have chuckle, murmured, blushed, no. Page 78. We have breathed. Chuckled. Page 79. Laugh. We have shrugged. Then page 80. We have thundered. We have thundered. Laughter. Cried. Snapped. So those are onomatopoeic words. Then I saw some similes. I think one came on page 74. The radiator exuded a rumbling. Even rumbling is onomatopoeic. The radiator exuded a rumbling hydraulic noise like a wild beast. That is page 74. Another one, I think I saw it on page was it 77? 77? Her smile was like a light brightening up the kitchen. Did we have another? I thought I saw more. Those are two. Those are two. '79. So his sentences sounded like a string of words struggling to sound connected. That is three of them. Again, 79. It melts just like butter on hot toast. Page 78. Bubbling with energy and excitement like a gust of wind sending sheaves of paper dancing in the air. Her teeth sticking out like a timid teenage girl. 78. All right, so those are the next is vivid description. Of course, we have vivid description of page 73 when Shege gets to Hedro and he's in the coach. He tells us about the experience here, describing something. He says he gazed and he saw a 3-lane motorway with blue road signs that cropped up every now and then. Everything was well ordered with no risk of getting lost. Then he sees Milton Keynes, Junction 14, half a mile. And then on page 74, while the jet lag gnawed at him and the landscape, so he saw the green rolling hills and farmhouses. Then they were well-trimmed fields and sheep grazing in the early light. The green in England was a dull grayness about it. There was some mist dulled colors. In the room, he sees something that looks like a car radiator set against the wall below the window. He fiddles with a round knob and waits. He reads about it and finds the central heating. The radiator exudes some sound and it warms him up. He also looks at the window. He sees well-trimmed lawn and flower gardens. And what else? The red brick buildings crammed together. The buildings separated by lawns and well-signposted roads and pathways. I think those are the major vivid descriptions here. Some few also involve the people, like a description of Molly. Molly comes wearing jeans, a white t-shirt on page 77, and a multicolored shawl over her shoulders. She wore glasses which made her look studious without diminishing the playfulness she exuded. She kept her mouth slightly open in the pout. Another style that stands out here, I think we have a lot of ellipses. From page 73. Thank you, sir. Shege states, and so there is ellipsis. Page 76. Pedro says, but I must warn you, the food here. So there is ellipsis there when he's hesitating to speak. Page 77. I think they called it stick and kidney tart or pie. There is a station there. So ellipsis is found. And then another ellipsis comes on page. No, these others are not. It's just about the accent. We see different accents. I think that's under the theme of diversity. Then I thought of some personification. I may not be able to get them now. There is some contrast. I think they kind of contrasted these people, like how Ede speaks and how Peggy speaks. Okay, there is some juxtaposition right there. Yeah, so let's end here. I have to go to church. Bye bye. Let's meet again another time, I believe, just today to discuss chapter 14. Chapter 14. It will be necessary because yesterday we skipped a day and I am targeting specific number of days to end this.